But it's my pleasure now to introduce the following panel. How do we fight China? Critical minerals in a critical time. Fantastic keynotes, I mentioned them earlier. I'm really excited to welcome, where's Trevor? Trevor, Adrian, and Bob Wares on the stage to moderate this. Trevor, Adrian, thank you so much, and Robert as well, of course, for jumping in fairly short notice. But I know you're going to kill it. I'm not too worried. Thanks so much.
I think I can go there. Okay. Good morning. My name is Trevor Hall. I'm excited to be hosting this panel on China and critical minerals. I think this is a very interesting topic. I've shared a stage with Adrian before, Bob. I don't think I've shared one with you, so it's a pleasure to be up here with you. I know this was kind of put together last minute, and there were some kind of thread messages back and forth about, well, if we have to stand in the shoes of another young legend in the making, we got to make this as dynamic as possible. And so I think this conversation regarding critical minerals and the role China plays in this market, but on top of that, filling a void if the world continues down this deglobalized route, and where those critical minerals sit, I think, is a very interesting topic. Maybe we should talk about, kind of set the stage of what is a critical mineral now? I mean, we understand, we've always understood rare earths, but can we put the base metals in as critical minerals now because so many governments have deemed them necessary? How about uranium and energy metals? So maybe let's talk about how this spectrum of critical minerals has changed over the last very short couple of years. Maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, most, at least Western governments, have gone through half the periodic table and declared that they were all critical minerals in the last 3 years. It's a bit absurd, but all this, it was an initiative that was triggered, of course, by global warming. So when you look at the metals needed to fight global warming, which is, of course, a concern to most Western societies, that's when the focus was made on a number of metals that are essential. If you want to get down in terms of volume, for example, copper is the critical metal. Nothing's going to happen without a very significant increase in copper production, because copper is involved in every form of renewable or alternative energy. And without copper, there will be no, at the lead at least, there will be no decarbonation of our economy. And of course, then there's a whole list of other metals that are actually dependent on technology. So lithium is a great example because it's all about lithium batteries, but what if next year a successful sodium battery hits the market and replaces lithium? So technological innovation may displace other metals such as lithium. But the fundamental metals needed to forge ahead, I used to call them base metals, but of course now they're called critical metals. Copper for anything electrical, zinc for galvanization. It's all very nice to have electric vehicles, but I don't think anybody wants to drive electric rust buckets. Those vehicles will still have to be galvanized. All the infrastructure related to wind, onshore and offshore wind farms require a lot of galvanized steel. And the list goes on. And the data is available in terms of establishing which minerals are critical in which technology you choose. But certainly there are base cases for a number of technologies that require a certain number of metals which will remain critical. So in terms of supply then, we had deglobalization is critical, no pun intended. We cannot rely on China if we want to forge ahead with decarbonization. We have to secure our own resources, and unfortunately, the reality is China, in terms of securing resources, is way ahead of us. They've been way ahead of the Western economy for at least a couple of decades. Unfortunately, I find that in our Western economy, we've had the attitude, especially in states, that we can simply buy our resources. That's a thing of the past. You can't just walk into a foreign country and wave the money and expect a secure supply chain. It simply will not happen. The competition's too strong. So we have to find other alternatives in order to secure those resources. And that's the essence of, I think, a critical portion of moving ahead towards our goal of net zero by 2050.
I don't think I can add anything else to this speech. So first, I don't know what I'm doing sitting right now next to this legend. That's the first. And what is a critical mineral? For me, our modern societies run on commodities. So for me, any metal that we can't mine enough in the West, like in Europe or US, could be critical. Even for me, it's very critical. For example, the met coal, the metallurgical coal, needed to make steel, high-quality steel, is still very strategic. Only a couple of countries can produce it in great quantities. So, but for me, I think the great challenge is not the upstream, but the downstream. Because we can start many mines, like a mountain pass in rare earth in the US, but even if you open the mines, you need the downstream and the refining capacity, and that's exactly where China has the power and all the breakthrough technologies. So even if you can open new mines, the downstream is still a big bottleneck because they have been developing these downstream capacities for decades. So they perfectly understand the technology and build a copper smelter, for example, or a separation plant for rare earths in the West is still very difficult from a permitting perspective, from a capex perspective. So I think that's the real challenge, the building a downstream capacity here back in the West. So back to the question, what's a critical mineral? For me, almost all the metals are critical.
That's a really good point, Adrian, and I think we should come back to this refining capacity within the conversation, because I have a couple examples, obviously not with me, but I just know some of the major goods producers, technology producers, there's a huge reliance on China for refining and smelting. We can come back to it. But I do want to ask, kind of go back to this, the role of China. And there's been news in the last couple of weeks that really show a different direction towards how support we have for mining, specifically with copper. Here in the West, we've seen the Cobre project in Panama. That's they are going on care and maintenance now because of the blockade and protest against that massive mine that has a tremendous amount of copper production. That copper's offline now, it sounds like. I just saw news in the last couple hours. But on the east side, China comes in and buys a project in Botswana for about $2 billion called the Khoemacau Copper Project. That's a project near and dear to my heart, because actually that's the project, my very first contract I ever signed as an independent contractor was with Khoemacau Copper in Cooper Canyon. So it's nice to see that come into fruition. But the Chinese buys that project. That was announced yesterday. Can we talk about why are we going in so many different directions? When the East is, when China can see opportunity and know that they need to look 30, 50 years down the road for production, where the West continues to kind of stumble over our own feet and make mining harder, especially if we keep pushing this critical minerals, renewable energy. There is a disconnect here. How do we juggle? How do we juggle and make sense of all this?
Well, in short, government policy. On most Western governments, on the one hand, are waiving the need for critical metals, and on the next hand, they're making permitting almost a nightmare. And it's a complete disconnect from completely disjointed and discoordinated government policies. Take the U.S., for example. 2 world-class copper deposits, Resolution in Arizona and Pebble in Alaska. Pebble is by far the biggest undeveloped copper gold deposit in the world. It's so astoundingly big, it boggles the mind. The Biden administration wants to make Bristol Bay a nature protection zone. If that goes through, it's the end of the biggest copper deposit in the Americas. It's ridiculous. So I don't know where the states think they're going to get their copper, but the concept of producing copper in-house seems to be alien to the U.S. government policies. On the other hand, as we speak today, D&D's in Quebec, at Quebec Mines today, looking at Canada to supply the U.S. with lithium. There are a lot of potential lithium resources in the U.S. None of them are even considered for development. So until you have clarity and organization on the on the governmental side, we're not going to see any improvement, and that's the sad reality of it. Permitting, I will not go back. With the exception maybe Utah and Nevada, I have zero interest in going back to the U.S. to do exploration and find deposits. The permitting challenges are astronomical. When you consider Resolution's on its 10th year of permitting, with no end in sight, bogged down in endless litigation, it's extremely difficult. So Canada is still a fantastic place to explore because the road to permitting is clear. It's concise, there's a minimal risk, you know exactly what you have to do. Don't necessarily agree with all the hoops that you have to jump through, but at least you know what you're dealing with and you can put a budget and a time frame on it. But in many countries, the jurisdictional risk is too high. Look at Panama, and or you're just swimming in an opaque quagmire when it comes to getting to your permit.
Yeah.
And again, all this lies in the hands of government policies. That's where the core of the issue is globally.
Okay, yeah, this is a topic I really love to discuss, and I think it needs to begin with a change in society. I think it's not going to come from the government, but from the society itself. And that's actually one of the things I want to achieve with my book. It will be published in Spanish, but one of the missions is to demystify the mining industry and tell all the people, the average people, the average Joe in the street, that we need mining. And it's key for society and to keep our life standard. So there has been, as Trevor said, a big bifurcation on the two sides. On the west, that we say, no, we don't want any more mining. And instead, on the east, not just China, but for example, Japan or Korea had the same approach for decades. Japanese conglomerates and the Korean ones has been acquiring assets around the globe in copper, in met coal, in many commodities for decades. And China is just replicating that in the same way. And I think the key is first they think in decades perspective, not just the next quarter or the next year. They are thinking how is going to be the world in 30 years. That's a great change in mindset. So they beat any other bid for price. So any auction like the copper deal in Botswana, they are going to pay the higher price because they are thinking on the long term and they put the right value on a long-term life asset. In the West, I think we still need to see first a re-rate on the multiples, on the companies. So these companies has the incentive to build new assets and to make more M&A, pay higher prices. We need to see, especially on the West, from the government, a change on the permitting routes, because right now, as Robert said, it's absolutely crazy. And even if it's clear, like in Canada, it takes many years. So I think that's the permitting side is key to put a new supply on the West. And in general, we need a change on our mentality from society and from investors that they need to come back again to the mining sector and don't see it as a non-ESG sector and a dirty business as in the past. We need a general change of mind.
I want to go back and talk about government's involvement, especially in the West, with pushing critical mineral projects forward. A number of companies in the development stage have been given grants or money from the Department of Defense, the U.S. Department of Defense, for whatever it is, from antimony to nickel to, you name the topic. And I'm just kind of curious, when we see the market itself void of inflows, how critical is the U.S. and Canadian governments right now to keep these projects at least delivering and moving forward in a time where when the exchange is just really down in the dumps? And I want to piggyback because I know you say the U.S. it's really challenging. You won't go back and work on a project there, and I know, but I do want to say that they are pushing some projects forward. It's a little selective, but
well, it's very selective, and it's also statewide. It's a state-by-state situation.
Sure.
As I mentioned, I think Utah and Nevada are still great places to look. Possibly Alaska. But I'll give you a simple example. In our lithium vehicle, we went to Maine, just south of Canada, state of Maine. They have great undeveloped spodumene deposits in Maine. You can't even come close. So until 2 weeks ago, open pit mining was illegal in Maine. And now they're thinking of making an exception for lithium because the regulators have been convinced that a open pit lithium mine is not much different than a granite quarry. You're essentially mining the same kind of rock. There'll be minimal waste, so they're going to change the rules. And that's great. So now you have the possibility of opening a mine in Maine for lithium, but everywhere you go, it's private property. You can't even drill a hole without a very expensive acquisition deal. It's just, as I said, the entire structure is impossibly complicated. And in Canada, when you want to know who owns a claim, most of the information is available online. Such a thing does not exist in the States. You have to go and dust off old claim maps that are 50 years old from some obscure registrar's office somewhere in a given state. It's just so difficult. As I said, I can't.
Adrian might do it for free.
So it's very nice to throw. There's the IRA in the States. Trudeau government announced a $1.5 billion infrastructure funds. All fantastic. It's very nice to throw money at these opportunities, and then comes the reality. You still have to deal with the permitting process. All of a sudden, great, now we have money, we have potential. Oh, God, I got to spend the next 5 years still slogging through the permitting process. And the Trudeau government has made the Canadian permitting process far more complicated than it used to be, although it's been recently challenged in Supreme Court, Canada, which is a good thing. They accused the federal government of overstepping their boundaries, so now it's going to be a legal battle as to how this gets modified, and I'm hoping it's going to be simplified again. But right now, if you have to involve federal agency, provincial agencies, plus what's called DFO in Canada, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, if you happen to have a stickleback in your swamp, all of a sudden you have to deal with DFO, which adds another 3 years, believe it or not, to the permitting process. So it's not simple by any means, but at least the time frame on average in Canada, you're looking about 5 years, which is much better than 10 years plus in many other jurisdictions. But throwing money and incentive programs helps, but it's certainly not part of the solution to stimulate development because, again, the time frame is onerous in most jurisdictions.
But as from an investor's point of view, if you see the U.S. government and whatever various agency pushing money towards a specific project, I mean, does that give you any reason to be a little bit more, I guess, bullish in that specific company and project? Because it just kind of seems like, they're starting to cut the red tape a little bit on that. And I'm thinking, like, the one project in the back of my mind would be the Stibnite project in Idaho.
Yeah.
So it seems like
the red tape has not been cut back significantly, in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, as I said, financial incentives and so on are great, but at the end of the day, you're still going to have to go through a long drawn process, and it's not easy. I mean, in Idaho, you have to do archaeological studies and environmental impact studies before you can even start drilling. To me, that is so alien. I mean, it takes 3 months to get a drilling permit in most of Canada. Why would you want to do an archaeological study, right? To me, an exploration program has zero environmental impact. We're talking zero here, but even governments are blowing that out of proportions. In some states in the US, you have to seal every drill hole with bentonite. I mean, it's complete waste of money. It's completely unnecessary. You know, the rules change so much state by state. You have to have a nationwide stable policy to make it easy to do exploration. Only less than 1% exploration programs actually lead to a mine. So the chances are already stacked against you. If you discourage and keep piling on red tape to the exploration phase, we're not even going to find the deposits that we need to develop.
Adrian, I want to ask you, we've talked a lot about the West. Let's talk about, since we're here in Germany, let's talk about the EU and where these critical minerals are going to be found. And I keep on thinking about Scandinavian countries in the north, obviously a lot of mining and exploration, very active up there for a number of minerals that are on those critical mineral lists. How, is that enough? Is the likes of Sweden, Norway, Finland, is that enough exploration and mining to fill the need of future critical minerals here in Europe?
Not even close.
I think it depends on the commodity. For example, right now Sweden is thinking to change their policy with uranium, and the new energy minister is thinking to quit the ban on mining. So that could be a game changer, because Sweden has the largest uranium reserves in Europe. And in general, Scandinavia has an amazing geological endowment. So I think it could provide a lot of supply. And right now, Portugal is discussing a lot of lithium projects and opening new projects there. But yeah, I think Robert summarized it a lot, very well. I think in general, grants and all the money from government is in general overrated. It helps, but it's overrated. And in general, just the well-connected companies can get that money. I think it's a better idea just to change the rule games and make a better, clear pathway of permitting. It's better than just throw away money in different companies. So yeah, I think Europe can self-supply many commodities. They can do it, but it's gonna take many years. And the key is rethinking the permitting, because it's not feasible that you need over 10 years to permit a mine. Because if you are a junior, you're going to dilute yourself on the way, maybe not raise enough money to advance that, so it's completely crazy. But we can do it, I think. And it's just a couple of projects in lithium in Portugal could be enough to supply, I think, over 40% of European demand.
Let's talk about China. And listen, there was the Cold War between East and West continued this fall when China put I guess not sanctions or tariff or whatever that's on their gallium and germanium. And for us participants in the junior mining sector, we were laughing because we couldn't wait for the next couple companies to say they had a gallium and germanium deposit. and it started to happen. But that news kind of had some headway in our little niche market, but had absolutely zero effect on the actual gallium germanium market. In fact, China's come out and said we're lifting whatever that was because it had zero effect. But what would be the role of critical minerals in a heightened geopolitical issue between the East and West? I mean, would we see these critical minerals that China produces and supplies the world at the forefront of a major Cold War?
Well, you're talking about,
You're
talking about weaponizing critical minerals. Again, it depends on the individual metal. Rare metals like gallium or germanium, they're necessary, but also inconsequential on a larger scale because the markets are so small. We're talking about very, very small quantities. Both of those metals are actually byproduct of zinc and aluminum. There are no primary gallium or germanium mines. So in case of gallium, it's either zinc or bauxite byproduct, and germanium is zinc. So if you're a miner, no smelter is going to pay you for the gallium and the germanium sitting in the con. It's just, you'll never see it. If you're producing a moly-con, no smelter is ever going to pay you for the rhenium that's in there. The smelters make the money, but the miner gets nothing. So there's absolutely no incentive for byproduct rare metals from the mining point of view. And since it's really all at the smelter and a trader level, it's a completely different ball game and market with respect to those metals. Whether China's interest to squeeze the West for these rare metals, possibly. It's been done before, certainly with rare earths. Again, it's the West's job to secure those metals. That's all there is to it, and decrease the dependence on China. Yeah. And it's not a hard thing to do as long as the right policies are there and you have the right engineers and geologists doing their jobs.
I think what a Cold War could mean for commodity prices, if history tells us something, is that we are just going to see higher prices. In many cases in the past, like during the First and Second World War, basically commodity prices skyrocket. Because not just for the higher demand during war times, but because the different sides try to get all the supply and make it that the rival didn't get it. For example, there was a very famous case during the Second War that both the Germany and Italy tried to get all the tungsten for the armors and the bullets from Galician and from the Spanish mines. And US and UK had all the supply enough for their armies in US and Myanmar. But they tried to buy all the tungsten possible from Spain, basically to stop the supplies to Germany. And basically that makes prices goes up 100 times. And it was a massive tungsten rush in Spain. So I think what it means, without actions from the West, it will mean higher prices, completely.
We have a couple of minutes left, so if anybody has one question, please raise your hand for either Robert or Adrian. I prefer no questions my way, because they're smarter than I am. So yeah, just raise your hand if you have anything. Moving forward, Robert, maybe let's leave with something actionable here. If you're an investor in the exploration space and you're watching, everything around you move incredibly fast, and you're interested in critical minerals, where do you start? Do you talk about the macro, the big picture thing, or do you narrow it down to a micro by region? East, Europe or the West. How do you kind of pinpoint where you want to take this?
Well, I think for an investor,
grab your microphone. Sorry.
Yeah, I think for an investor, the best bet is on the larger commodities, such as nickel, zinc, copper. That's where the bulk of the cash flow, the investment is going to go anyways, because that's where the bulk of the volume is going to be required. When you get into very rare metals or rare earths, it's very market specific, small quantities. Make no mistake, I'm very bullish on critical metals. We're going to need them if the plan is going to be serious about decarbonation. There's a whole list of metals that we will need. But would I rather invest in a good copper project, for example, as opposed to a good rare earth project? No, I'll probably go with the copper. The demand, for example, simple demand, rare earths, it's the heavy rare earths that carry value. Most rare earth deposits in North America are light rare earths. It's going to be a long time before they acquire real value.
Adrian, do you have any follow-up?
Just buy everything you can.
Except for gallium and germanium.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we're going to cut it. Oh, we have a question.
You haven't talked about graphite. How about graphite?
Graphite. Oh, graphite. Excuse me. Actually, we should talk about graphite because that actually was making good news.
Lots of graphite around. I'm not concerned about that.
I mean, between Brazil, even the U.S. has a number of graphite projects in the lower 48. Brazil is obviously a major contributor to the graphite market. I'm actually not terribly concerned about graphite myself.
No. And you have synthetic graphite, which is more than enough to get the demand done.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.